Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. Today's video is another episode of my favorite series, New and Must-Have Crafty Supplies. In these videos, I try out some new supplies on the market, share them with you so that you can see them up close and personal, because it can be really hard to decide if you need or want something just based on a photo on a website. I have a bunch of new supplies to share with you today, including some of Simon Says Stamps Stamptember release that will be restocked. So if you find these things out of stock when you go to check them out, just know that Simon Says Stamp will be replenishing them. Those include some new 3D embossing folders from them, the A2 version of their holographic rainbow cardstock, a very cool cling stamp that I wasn't sure if I needed, but I'm so glad that I ended up purchasing, and some of my favorite sentiment strips. There's a trick to those sentiment strips. If you haven't seen it before, you can actually foil them. I also decided to try out the new Mica sprays from Holtz. Now, these won't be replenished once they sold out, so if you like them, I definitely recommend picking them up. I like them so much that I'm gonna grab the Christmas release as well. To go along with those Halloween colors of Mica sprays, I did grab some My Favorite Things dies and stamps for Halloween, so I do have a few Halloween cards to share with you today. Last but not least, if you've seen any of my other new and must-have crafty supplies videos, you know I love Tonic Studios Nuvo Drops, so I have a new color of jewel drops, glitter drops, and vintage drops to share with you. Let's take a look at all these new products in action. These are the two Halloween packs of Distress Mica Stain from Holtz. I had never tried Mica Stain before, so this was all new to me. They are selling like crazy. So I've linked to what I could. If you see them in your local store, I would definitely recommend picking them up because I think they're selling out. This is the dies and stamp set from My Favorite Things that I'm going to use to create those Halloween cards. And these are the 3D embossing folders that I grabbed from Simon Says Stamp. These are amazing. If they're out of stock, they will come back, as well as the holographic rainbows. You may remember I used the 8.5 by 11 holographic rainbow. This is A2, so the entire rainbow is represented on an A2 piece of cardstock. I love them. This is the cling stamp I was talking about. This one is from Simon Says. It's called Concentric Doodle. Just really liked the pattern and also the shape of the stamp, and I'm going to share a couple of ways to use it. This is Simon Says Flipped Hello die. I like this because you can use the negative to create a sentiment on your card panel, or you can use the positive pieces to create the sentiment glued onto another card panel. These are the reverse many thanks sentiment strips. You know I love these sentiment strips because they're so affordable, but these ones are easier to foil. And here are the new Nuvo Drops. In the Jewel Drops, I have Holly Berries, which these will dry a touch translucent. I have Grotto Green in the Glitter Drops. These dry both raised and glittery. You can see all that glitter in the bottle. And then the Vintage Drops I have in Postbox Red. All right, so let's try all these products out. First, I'm going to start with the Mica sprays. So I am working on a waffle flower water media mat, but I have a piece of palette paper underneath because I have no idea if these would clean off. So I am just going to spritz in a bunch of different areas to create a multicolor shiny background. And you can see all that shine when it dries. It's absolutely amazing how easy it is to create a background. This one I'm just going to cover up with the orange color and then just add some highlights with the yellowy gold color. Absolutely amazing. This took me 3 seconds to spray, and then I just have to set it aside for a minute or two to dry, and look at all that shine. And you could kind of see from that last panel that you can layer colors on top of each other, especially if you give them a few seconds to dry in between spraying. So give the first layer a second or two to dry. You could see how it dried back, and then I put some purple on top. Give that a second or two to dry, and then go to the next color. Once it doesn't look wet, you're ready to layer colors on top of each other. And again, just took me like a minute to create this background. This is not something that I normally feel comfortable getting all grungy in the background, but I really like the effect. For the concentric doodle stamp, I am going to stamp it twice. I'm going to use my Stamper's Secret Debbie tool because it is a large stamp and I want the whole impression to get stamped out. I'm using waterproof dye ink from the Stamp Market. This is my favorite black ink unless I'm doing Copic coloring, but today I'm going to do watercoloring. So this is waterproof ink and it just stamps beautifully and very, very crisp and clear. I'm also going to stamp one and heat emboss it. That's why I'm prepping this cardstock with anti-static powder and then sweeping away the excess with my Tonic Studios sweep. Again, using some embossing ink and my Debbie tool to get a great impression. Of course, this is going to be hard to see because I'm using white embossing powder on white cardstock, but you can kind of see the impression there. For my watercoloring today, I'm going to be using the Caron Brush Marker Pros. If anybody hasn't seen my Caron marker video, I will link to that down in the YouTube description box below the video, but these are my favorite watercolor markers. So what I'm doing is taking the marker and coloring in from the center of the circle halfway out to the image, and then using a wet brush to stretch that color out to the rim of that circle. You probably saw that I skipped a circle and then went back to it. That's because the two circles around it were pretty wet still, and I didn't want things to start to get all mushy and color to kind of bleed together, because orange and blue would definitely make some brown there. So going back in and adding a little bit of color to places that I felt like were light, but here's one way to use that. And then I'm going to use some of that spray stain, just droplets rather than a full spray this time. That's by just pressing the nozzle slightly. And I love the effect that has on that background. For the heat embossed background, I'm going to do some ink blending, and I'm using Distress Oxide Kitsch Flamingo, and I'm lightly blending the outer circle with that Kitsch Flamingo. I'm using a domed foam blender. That's, for me, one of the ways to get color in a specific area, but light hand, because I have a very heavy hand when I ink blend. I love the dome foam blenders for that. I'm also going to use some dried marigold right inside that Kitsch Flamingo, and then some squeezed lemonade, and then I go back over all of these to get a nice smooth blend, and then a little mica spray on top. Again, you can see how I'm just very slowly pressing the nozzle so that it gets driplets. I'm going to combine the A2 holographic rainbow paper and the 3D embossing folders to create some amazing backgrounds. For the Gemini Junior, I used a top plate and the magnetic shim to emboss this 3D embossing folder. For the second one, I'm going to first cut out the flipped hello. The reason that I cut it out before I emboss it is because when you run it through the die cut machine to cut it out, you're going to flatten out the embossing if you do it the other way around. So first, die cut that hello sentiment out, remove those letters, and then run it through the embossing folder and just check out all that shine and color, and then we have the sentiment cut out as well. The little tiny jack-o'-lantern dies from My Favorite Things are definitely ones that I recommend using thin adhesive sheets with, because the little eyes and nose are so tiny. Just like an eye dot, if you place the little die in place on your pumpkin and then press out the nose with your Spellbinders 2-in-1 or other, paper piercer, you can get that nose in the exact right space. I cut out 3 stems of the same color and I just glued them together with some liquid glue. Okay, for the Tonic Studios Nuvo Drops, I want to show you the difference. I've done this before, but for those of you who are new to Tonic Studios Nuvo Drops, the difference between these 3 different types of drops. So this first one is the jewel drops. Those will dry slightly translucent. The second one that I'm working with is the glitter drops. They have actual glitter in there. The thing about all 3 of these is that they will dry dimensional, and you can see that you can get a pretty tiny dot. So if you want the look of enamel dots, but you want something smaller than what you have on hand, these Nuvo drops are great for that. And last but not least are the vintage drops. Those dry matte. So again, you can see how tiny I can get them, and also how they round out on their own. I'm not doing any swirling or weird technique. I'm just squeezing them out. And here's how they look when they're dry. So still dimensional, glitter in the middle, translucent at the top, and matte at the bottom. So that's the effects that you can achieve with these 3 different types of drops. Now that you've seen these new supplies in action, let's make some cards. For this first card, I'm going to create a little shaker window. So I'm going to use some Judikins embossable window plastic, and I'm going to place tape runner all around the back of that embossed A2 holographic rainbow cardstock that we die cut the flipped hello out of. And then I'm just going to carefully flip it over and line it up on top of that plastic so that I can create my shaker window. Now, yes, this is a small area of shaker because it's just the sentiment, but I really still think it looks super cool when it's done. I do like to adhere the little center pieces to the letters so that it's easier to read, I think. So I'm putting the O's and the E's back in with some liquid glue, and I'm adhering it right to that window plastic there. Once that's done, I am going to create the little shaker window that's going to house the shaker goodies by using foam tape. I'm not going to use anything really large in my shaker today, so I only need 1 layer of foam tape, but I do still include some at the top and the bottom so that the card doesn't fold up, especially in the mail. I'm going to use some of these sequins from the Missy's line. I love these. They're iridescent. Some of them are really tiny, and they will show through really pretty from the front. Once you peel off the back protector layers of the foam tape, just place a piece of A2 cardstock on top of those, flip it over, and you have your tiny little hello shaker window. You can see all those little goodies inside, and then that rainbow and embossing is just amazing. For the other embossed panel, I am going to cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4 and then adhere it to an A2 piece of white cardstock. This time I'm going to use one of the sentiment strips from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to just leave it black and white. So I pick out the one that I want, cut it out with my paper trimmer, and then I'm going to pop this up on some black foam squares. Since this strip is mainly black, you won't be able to see the foam squares peeking out behind it with white, and adhere that down. And I don't think this card needs much more, but you could add some glitter drops if you wanted to, just on the areas of the blue and green. I'm using that grotto green to add just another element of sparkle and dimension to this otherwise just easy to put together card. For the concentric doodles, I am going to cut them out. This is a really easy fussy cut, so I don't mind doing it, and it just gives me a better idea of exactly how I want to use it on my card. I'm going to put some tape runner behind part of it and lay it down on an A2 card here. And then I'm going to flip it over and cut off the excess. And I'm going to save that because I am going to make 2 cards out of each stamped image that I created with this stamp set. So it is large enough. You could fill up the whole center of an A2 card. You could make a larger card if you wanted to. I decided to make all A2 cards, and I'm going to use all of the pieces of the concentric doodle. For the ink blended one, I did die cut the flipped hello out of some silver sparkle cardstock, and I'm using the positive pieces here instead of that negative, and I'm using my T-ruler to line up the hello so that it's nice and straight across the center of the card, and I'm just going to leave this one as is. I did mention at the beginning of the video that the Simon Says Stamp sentiment strips can be foiled. You can use Thermoweb's Deco Foil Transfer Sheets, and they will adhere to the toner. Since there's more toner on these than the ones that are white with the sentiment printed in black, these are actually easier to foil. So there's lots of toner to stick to it. So I'm going to cut out a strip of the Deco Foil in gold. I've created a parchment paper sandwich, just a piece of parchment paper folded in half, and I'm going to lay the foil on the strip with the color side facing me, the silver side facing down. Then fold up that parchment paper strip, and I'm going to use the edge of that sandwich to run through my laminator. The laminator is good and hot, like 15 minutes sometimes, to really make sure it's hot, and then you can see that it's adhered, even just looking at it like this. But once you let it cool, then you can peel off the foil and reveal the absolutely amazing gold that's underneath. So it sticks to anything that is printed in toner and therefore was black. So the only thing that is not stuck with foil is the sentiment itself, which is still in white. I'm going to pop that up right in the middle of the card because I think it's so fantastic, and I just want it to be the star of this show, and then the beautiful ink blended with the mica spray background underneath. So I'm going to cut out the other concentric circle as well because I liked how much that I was able to use the two halves on the last one on white cardstock, one on colorful cardstock. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to put half of it on white cardstock, half of it on colorful cardstock, and then I'm going to work on my sentiments after that. I'm going to use one of the sentiment strips in black, just trim it down so it fits exactly how you want it on your card. And this one with all those mica sprays, I'm just going to add a little bit of the jewel drops in the darker orange area, just one more element of embellishment on this background. I absolutely love the way the watercolor, the mica spray, and the jewel drops look together. For the other one, I'm going to use the positive pieces from the first shaker card that we cut out. I had just set them aside, and now I'm just using them in any combination of order here. I didn't make sure that they were in the same order that they were cut out of, and I kind of like the way that looks too, just curved around the concentric doodle. And then I'm using the Grotto Green Nuvo glitter drops as a little embellishment around the letters too. Once my mica spray backgrounds were dry, I did trim them down to mat them on different colors of cardstock. And for the little jack-o'-lanterns, once they were dry, I popped them up on some foam tape at the bottom of this panel. And now I'm going to use the little sentiments, the itty bitty Halloween sentiments from My Favorite Things. I'm lining up 3 of them in my mini Misty, and I'm going to use some anti-static powder tool on black cardstock with some embossing ink on the tiny little sentiments. I know these sentiments are super small, but you can still get a really cute white embossed look on black cardstock that is just fantastic for this type of simple card. I really like the way it just pops off that beautiful background that literally took me 3 seconds to make. Any mica sprays that come out in the future, I will be buying. So I'm going to use some of the glitter drops on the stems, and that just completes a very simple card to put together for Halloween that has tons of extra interest on it as well. For the other Halloween dies, I did cut them out of this plum cardstock from Gina K Designs. You can see I cut it in the center so that I could use that A2 piece as a mat for the other mica spray background. This time I'm gonna stamp and heat emboss right on the mica spray. I wanted to see if this would work. It does, as long as you let the mica sprays completely dry, so there is no moisture in them at all. You can then put some anti-static powder on them and stamp it with embossing ink, and check that out. I thought it looked really great on the background. For the brim of the witch's hat, I am using some Spectrum Noir, their clear shimmer pen, and I have not used these in a while, and they are a really easy way to add a little shine to a die cut or an element of your card that you've colored in, and I just love that little bit of shine over the color of the cardstock. I did pop up the witch's hat. For the cauldron, I'm going to adhere it right down to my card, and then I did cut out the top of the cauldron again so that I could get the liquid inside to look like the bubbles that I cut out. I love that this die has those little bubbles that you can just adhere down with some liquid glue. Again, very easy card to create. For this mica spray background, I am going to cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4 so I can mat it on some key lime cardstock that I am going to use for die cuts on the card as well. I popped up the little witch's boots on some pieces of foam squares that I did trim so that they would fit behind there. And then I used the same black foam squares behind the legs that I'm going to pop up and place right inside the boots there. For the little tights or sock stripes, I am cutting them out of the same key lime green as the background and then adhering them with liquid glue. I know this looks a little tedious maybe, but there are little embossed lines on the purple socks so that you can see exactly where the stripes go. For this sentiment, I am going to stamp it in black ink. I'm using the Stamp Market Black again, and I'm stamping it on white cardstock this time. I'm just going to trim it down to a little rectangle. I used 2 of the sentiments, Hey Ghoul Friend and Best Witches, and then I just popped that up. Again, with that crazy amazing background that was so easy to make with the mica sprays, you don't need to do much else, and this card really still shines. I'd love to hear what your favorite new supply was from today's video. Let me know in the comments below. If you've missed any of my new and must-have crafty supplies videos from the past, I'll have them all linked over here. If you want to see more product reviews like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so that you can be notified every time I have a new video available. As always, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. How I turned them. I didn't turn the supplies into cards. It's so weird. Why? Why? It's because I only have limited time and I gotta get this done. That's why. Of course, everything goes wrong. Cards in action. Oh my gosh.